Pam McVeigh thought you might enjoy this story. It's my version of a story that was based on a Jewish folktale, and I call it simply The Quilter. And it's dedicated to all of us, and especially to Lavella. There was once a woman who loved to quilt. She made quilts for her family. She made quilts for her friends. She never ran out of people to give quilts to. And she loved every part of the quilting process. She liked picking out the patterns, choosing fabrics, cutting, sewing, quilting, and binding the finished quilt. And of course, she loved to shop too. But she was a very thrifty sort of person. So she watched for sales, and she cut out coupons, and she went by legacy frequency. And every time she made a quilt, she would save the scraps to use in another quilt. And she would sort those scraps by color into baskets. So her sewing room, in it, she was surrounded by a rainbow of colored fabrics. And she had one basket that was filled with special scraps. And these were leftovers from quilts made for very, very special people, and the last bits of a much-loved fabric. And those she thought, well, someday she would make something special for herself. But rarely, not very often, did she make a quilt for herself. She made lots and lots and lots of community quilts. I hope I mentioned that. And then, one day, she had just finished a quilt for a favorite niece. And she thought, it's time. It's time to make myself a quilt. So she got out that basket and went through them, scrap by scrap. And she thought about all those people that she loved and all the quilts. And then she realized that she didn't really have room in her tiny house for another quilt. Every bed had at least 2 quilts. Every wall had a quilt on it. There were seasonal quilts packed away in closets. There were a pile of quilts to curl up with at any opportunity. What was she going to do? And then she remembered that a friend had given her a pattern for a coat. So she got out the pattern, and she thought, oh, that would be fun, to wear the scraps. And so she spread out the pattern pieces, and she began to put those scraps on it. And sure enough, she had just enough to make the quilt, to make that coat. And she worked. Oh, it took her quite a while, but when she finished, it was a stunning quilt. She couldn't wait to wear it to the guild. Her friends surrounded her and paid her lavish compliments. And when she stood up for show and tell, there was spontaneous applause. Well, she wore that coat. Oh, she loved wearing it. But when the weather turned warmer, she was going to put it away, and that's when she noticed the cuffs and the hem were starting to fray. Oh, what could she do? And she was telling a friend about it, and the friend said, oh, make a jacket. Make a jacket with 3/4 sleeves. And so that's what she did. She cut it down to a good-looking jacket with 3/4-inch sleeves, and she could wear the jacket even more places than the coat. But the jacket, well, to tell the truth, it was getting a little snug, and one of the elbows was almost worn through, and those cuffs were starting to go again. And she looked at it, she hated to give it up, and she looked at it, and she realized if she took the sleeves off, she could make a vest out of it. And even better, she could use part of the sleeves as side gussets and no one would be able to tell. Well, she decided to keep that vest for special occasions. And when one of those special occasions arrived, she took it out, and she was horrified to see that moths had gotten in and chewed holes in most unstrategic places. Now she was really going to have to give it up, and she was bemoaning its fate to that same friend, and the friend said, make a purse. So there was just enough to make a nice clutch purse. Ooh, she used it day after day, month after month, until it began to fall apart. She was ready to give it up. And then she looked at it, and she saw that her very favorite scrap of fabric was still intact. Just enough to make a covered button. So she made herself another purse and sewed the button on it. But a couple months later, the button fell off and was lost. And now all that's left are her happy memories and the story I have just told you. And of course, our love for Lavella. Thank you.